Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our first Digital IQ series of the 2024-25 academic year. I was just looking at all the attendees who have already are in the webinar as we speak, and it's just, I have to say, really gratifying that all of you continue to join us at our events, even during such a wonderful summer. We took a chance this year and decided to do something in the summer, and it's good to see that so many of you could join us. It's heartwarming, actually, because when I look at the people who are here today, we have new friends, we have old friends. I have students from the past, colleagues from the business school who are probably in their offices watching, and a shout out to my friends at Chipotle who I'm told are watching over pizza in one of their rooms as a group. So thank you all for your continued interest in the activities that we're interested in. Before I get started, I do want to thank our benefactors, KPMG and the Beal Family Foundation, who provide us with the support to make it possible for us to offer these programs to all of you at no cost. And from our perspective, we just think, given what is going on in the world today around AI and business transformation, it's really essential for all of us to be far more familiar with what AI is, what the technology can do, and really what it means for our businesses. And as an educator, really what it means for all of us and our students in particular, because so much is changing so rapidly. It seems like you cannot read the papers without seeing some new announcement about what latest, greatest thing for example, large language models are able to do. But once you get past that, what becomes really important is, how do we implement AI in our organizations? And I couldn't think of a few better people than Prachi, Priya, to lead us through this discussion. Prachi and I have met each other a few years ago, and I followed her work with interest. She was the chief data officer at Team One, which is a division within the Publicis Group, which is one of the largest agencies in the world. And if you look at their website now, it's they've really sort of, through her efforts, launched themselves as a platform company, moving away from the traditional model of advertising. And she was responsible for building their Center of Excellence on Data and Analytics. And has put together a really interesting framework on how all of us can think about implementing data analytics and AI in our organizations, the things we need to take into account as we sort of scale our efforts around AIs. You've probably heard the phrase AI or prototype purgatory, or basically a lot of companies have gotten started but are having a hard time scaling AI in their organizations. And it's a very large dimension, multidimensional set of considerations that we have to take into account. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Prachi in just a second, but I do want to say our format is going to be, Prachi will speak for about 15 to 20 minutes. I'll talk to her for about 5 to 7 minutes. And then we'll turn it over to all of you for the interesting questions you always have for our speakers. We are not going to be using the chat function, which we have disabled. We are going to be using the Q&A function. So please use the Q&A function to start getting your questions. And I'll signal you when we're ready to start taking questions. But once again, with that, let me welcome Prachi to the stage, if the virtual stage. Prachi, thank you. If you could turn on your camera, that would be great. Thank you so much for doing this for us and helping educate our community. We're really gratified that you're willing to do this. I should have said, Prachi's, beyond her expertise that she's going to share with us today, she's particularly passionate about encouraging diversity and mentoring high school and college students about data and AI. So we're happy to be able to help her fulfill her mission while we fulfill ours. So Prachi, thank you so much. And we're really looking forward to what you have to share with us today. Take it away.
Thank you, Vijay, and thank you for the great introduction. I know we have limited time, so I'm going to get right into it. Let me share my screen and hope and pray for no technical glitches. Yeah, can someone say yes? Yes, see my screen? Okay, I see a lot of thumbs up. Great, let's get into it. So before we talk about AI, we'll start with something lighthearted, fun. Who loves ice cream? I'm guessing everyone loves ice cream here. Imagine you asked an AI to create ice cream flavors. Sounds harmless enough, right? Well, that's exactly what a group of researchers did. They fed the algorithm over 1,600 existing ice cream flavors to see what it would generate. The results, you will think amazing flavors, but it was not quite expected. So here are some of the results. They found flavors like pumpkin trash break, peanut butter slime, strawberry cream disease. And while it sounds very humorous, it definitely highlights a very critical point here that AI doesn't always the context like we do. We, as business leaders and AI practitioners, our job is to guide AI's focus to ensure that it meets our goals without creating unintended results. So let's dive into how we can harness AI's power and how do we unlock the growth and not peanut butter slimes of the world. So the way I'll go through this presentation, just kind of to level set, to ground it, I'll go through the current trends and some challenges. Then we'll go through the data maturity framework, and just finally we'll talk about the strategic framework that Vijay was talking about. I'll share with you all, and how do we scale AI in an enterprise. Before we get there, how did we get to this generative AI? Hoping you're familiar with this. Is called a data maturity framework. These are the milestones in the journey of data and AI, and it's just progression. It basically shows the growing sophistication of data analysis and AI, and each step which builds on the previous one, and it creates a more powerful and insightful solutions, going from descriptive to diagnostic, predictive, to now where we are at the generative AI, which grow and value potential to mature. And I know you all have a lot of facts coming at you from tons of articles, things from Media Channel, Harvard Business Review, McKinsey reports, overwhelming for all of us who are in this space about all the technology, all the development that's happening. Let's start with just a few facts. According to Forrester, 80% of firms expect the number of AI use cases will increase within the next 2 years. Generative AI, of course, we've heard of it. There are some stats that was released by McKinsey mid-2023 that generative AI could add the equivalent of 2.6 trillion to 4.4 trillion annually across 63 use cases that they looked at. And just for fun, the comparison, the United Kingdom's entire GDP in 2021 was 3.1 trillion. So now you understand the kind of the scale of it. And this would increase the impact of artificial intelligence by 15 to 40%. That's what they said in 2023. And across all the use cases, what are the few areas, disciplines that are going to be most affected? So customer experience, research and development, software development, and marketing and sales. So it's about 75% of the value that generative AI use cases could deliver fall across these 4 areas. And facts aside, data aside, what this is telling us, it doesn't matter what industry we are in, whether it's agriculture, education, technology, manufacturing, healthcare, several of functions are impacted by it in a good way. Sales and marketing happen to be at the top 2 affected area. So that was 2023. It was the year of proof of concept, or the year of hype. We have seen this Gartner hype cycle. What we need to know from here is that now in 2024, generative AI has passed the peak of inflated expectations. Hype still continues, but still it has passed the peak. So in 2024, can we call it the year of AI intent, where people are trying to do more POCs? Actually, a lot of adoption is happening. And we see the few results that are coming. It's becoming 2023 was the year of where people discovered Gen AI, or 2024 is the year where firms are truly beginning to use this and deriving business value from technology. And the good thing is this interest in generative AI has also brightened the spot for us on the broader set of AI capabilities that we have been using for years. So here you see, if you look at the left chart, which shows AI adoption worldwide, you see that the huge surge that goes from 55 to 72% for overall adoption of AI, and from 33 to 65%. And that's a big jump. And the interest is truly global in scope. And the two most common functions where Gen AI adoption is highest, marketing and sales, and product and service development. And most of these organizations, I'll say that's still in the early stages of Gen AI. We're still beginning to get a picture of what works and what doesn't in terms of implementing and generating actual value with technology. Talked about value. So wanted to make sure that we have that in here too, that because technology is not to be used just for technology's sake. We're using AI, any kind of technology for value creation. So we've invested in Gen AI, invested in analytical AI, which is the traditional form of AI. They are beginning to create value. And this is one of the survey results from McKinsey that they did early this year, which we are seeing the largest share of cost savings is human resources as a function. And then marketing and sales, where we are seeing the highest increase in revenue. And in terms of analytical AI, firms are seeing the cost benefits in service operations, chatbots, and things like that. And also, they're also seeing meaningful revenue increases from AI use in marketing and sales. And AI has been used in marketing and sales, and I'm talking about not just Gen AI, analytical AI as well, for a long time. So good to see some stats there. But this is, again, early 2024, and we'll see how we go through the year. Despite the spike in adoption of Gen AI, I'll still say we're still in that phase. Many organizations are seeking relatively simple one-step solutions. It varies by industry, but using readily available off-the-shelf solutions rather than custom design solution. And it's a very natural tendency in the early days of technology, but as we grow mature, organizations will need to ask themselves, like, what is our mode? What is our value? What is our business goal towards which we are creating AI, and go there. It's still not all a rosy picture. There are still a lot of challenges. There's still a lot of challenges that gets in the way of AI adoptions. 91% of companies have said that they have difficulty scaling AI across all the enterprise. And even though it's a part of CIO's innovation plan, fewer than half feel the organization can manage its risk. Why is that happening? One of the main reasons is AI has a data problem. 56% of AI users say it's difficult to get what they want out of AI. And it's a trust issue. If they're not getting what they want, they're not going to trust it. So trust in data impacts usefulness and adoption. And 75% of those who don't trust the data that trains AI, they're not going to use it, the information that is being generated for it. And AI that is trained on unreliable data, essentially garbage in, garbage out. There's a serious trust back, poor quality of data, shaky data governance, lack of skills. So how do we set up trusted data and get our data foundation ready for AI? We need to have a solid data strategy before rolling the red carpet for AI. And what does that mean? I'm skipping through the slide so that I can get to the meat of it. When it's trusted data, once we reach that, it means we will get the trusted AI. Is the data accurate? Is it secure? Is it a complete data? But how do we set this up? I have a slide that I'm going to show. You don't have to get into the details. There are many aspects of it from a data foundation perspective. And I put few of them in there. Is your data strategy centralized, distributed, hybrid? What about your data quality? Is your data cleansed and standardized for model building? Is the reference data linked? What about your data governance? Do you have it set up? Are the data labeled, cataloged? In terms of data engineering, how sophisticated are the data environments available? We're spending a lot of time in collecting the data, but not enough time in connecting the data. And this is what this slide shows, that you have to make sure your data is connected. There's one source of truth for your customers. There are data access and privacy set up for that. And you have a compliance with the cybersecurity, a risk management program. So this is a very comprehensive folder. And of course, you're not going to build Rome in a day. It's a crawl, walk, run approach. So now we have gotten to, once you have to assess your data foundation, once you have your data foundation in place, do you think the work AI readiness, I'll say, it's kind of like if I'm a baker. So it's like baking a cake. You need the right ingredients and the right steps to make it turn out just right. So if you're not prepared, you could end up maybe not more like a pancake and not a cake. So let's get into the framework, into how, and this is me coming from my experiences on what are the different steps. And so here's the framework. To integrate AI into business, we need some framework, a blueprint, a guide that guides through us through our data journey, and starts with defining business goals and building use cases. And I'm not going to go through each and every one of them, but I'll highlight a few of these, which I feel like are the essential beginning. The first one is setting the right goal for AI. I've had the pleasure of working with a phenomenal company and helping them build their AI strategy. I've presented to the board on numerous occasions. The one thing to remember is with any deployment or any strategy that's about to take shape or that's in discussion, you have to be realistic about the current maturity models. It's like I said, it's a very much a crawl, walk, and run approach. Because after New Year, I'll say everyone signs up for the gym, but you're not going to run a marathon in 2 to 3 months afterward. It's a muscle that fundamentally has to be built. And the same goes with AI project, given the amount of discussions and alignment that's going to happen. So I'll say, think big, start slow, and then yes, you can scale quickly. So crawl, walk, and then run. And when we are developing the AI strategy, it's important to be thoughtful about the next year, 2 or 3 years. But it's more important to be realistic about what we can actually deploy and what that means. Before we start any AI strategy and goal, there are a series of things we need to assess, from risk tolerance, from data infrastructure, talent, ability to focus, the funding that we need for it, and how many other strategic priorities exist within the company. All of that will lead to 5 basic AI goals that's shown here. Is it efficiency-based? Is it about effectiveness? It's about increasing your productivity, growth-based, or innovation. From there, from these, choosing one of the goals, we can start ideating and coming up with your use cases. And it's extremely important to align the strategy to the risk tolerance, maturity levels, and the overall business priorities. And that will help. So once you do set up your goals, then you build the use cases in terms of how is it aligned with what is the goal out of all of these 5. And then the assessment happens, like we're talking about, which ones can we implement today versus what needs to be implemented 2 years from now, and build that crawl, walk, and run roadmap. The other thing I'll say, the big thing about this is AI is you don't have to start large. It can be as simple as starting with off-the-shelf solution. If you want to create better content, better client presentation, or automate the entire note-taking process when you're in a sales call, so that instead of you trying to focus on taking notes while you're having a discussion, you summarize it, put it into the email, and then have follow-ups, and you can actually automate that process. So it could be as simple as that, or something your team is handling everyday requests. Can AI simplify that? Can we automate that? So it could be an automation, it could be an augmentation. What else on there? And this is an example of how I prioritize the use cases for companies. So the 2 axes that you see here, it depends on the complexity of the use case, and complexity can be defined based on your organization and what value does it bring. And value can also be subjective depending on, is it value in terms of increasing your customer NPS, Net Promoter Score? Is the value in increasing revenue? or bottom line. So that is also a discussion that needs to be had internally. But if you plot that based on the value at scale and complexity, you see there are low-hanging fruit that you can deploy easily, which are easy, low complexity, and low value. But those could be the quick wins that will help you pivot towards the bigger wins. Then what are some which needs to be parked for later because these are very high complex ones? What are the ones use cases which have high value, but they are very complex? So we can start planning for that now, but then deliver in the mid to long term. So having that, so any kind of framework, this is just one example, helps to kind of prioritize, assess your current state, where you are at, and then which ones can you pick. Once you go through that, I'll say the strategic alignment is the one that takes a long time. You cannot do this alone. I'll say data, AI, technology is a team sport, and getting a buy-in from the stakeholders at every level is extremely critical. And the more support you have, the easier it is to drive AI adoption. And this is one of the steps, one of the areas where a lot of AI projects fail because there's no stakeholder alignment. We talked about data ecosystem. This is the bedrock. This is the foundation of your AI strategy. If your data is not clean, structured, accessible, AI will be like a car without gas. Build a robust data ecosystem that can support that. And tech infrastructure, of course, they go hand in hand. You need a scalable and flexible tech stack to accommodate AI growth, because this includes cloud-based data lakes, security measures. Talent. I wrote a reinvent talent here just because it's, of course, we need the data scientists, we need AI engineers, but it's also extremely critical that we upskill and reskill the team. And also having the latest AI, the literacy program, so that you're not just educating your team, but also educating teams across the business team, across the organization. So everyone understands and is on the same page in terms of what we are trying to implement. Responsible AI. It's a huge topic. It would take the entire presentation. There's two really important aspects of this as well. There's an element of fear around security and data leakage, and the whole notion about responsible AI. And there are a lot of many tenets about it, the bias part of it. We don't have the time, but what I'll say is that has been being tackled by a lot of enterprises. There are a lot of enterprises who are considering either developing off of a pre-built model or developing off of an API from an LLM provider. Data leakage is a concern. So there are companies who are trying to solve for it. I know Credo AI has an amazing AI governance platform. The intent here is to make sure that when information is shared, it's the right information and it's secure. And definitely ethics matter. We'll have to set clear guidelines for responsible AI practices to ensure that we're not just compliant, but also doing what's right, because this is about building trust and avoiding all the potential pitfalls. And then last one, communication and collaboration. I'll say it's, like I said, it's not, AI is not just a technology problem or technology challenge. It's a people problem. And that's why it's extremely important to collaborate, create that collaborative environment where teams can work together towards that project and communicate. It's important to talk about those projects, talk about the small wins, the quick wins, because that sets up the trust in the organization on those projects, because these projects are not cheap. It is a very infrastructure, budget intensive project. So it's important to make sure that everyone is aligned in terms of that. And the last one, measurement. It's not enough to just deploy AI. We have to measure its impact. So once we are doing that, and I usually like to do this initially when we have finalized the use cases, that time you set up all the KPIs or OKR, objective and key results, on how we are going to track the progress and then adjust the strategy as needed. So this is the framework. This provides, that I've used in the past for 20 plus years of my career, not exactly 20 plus years, it's since this one AI and data teams have started. And this framework has helped me. This provides a comprehensive roadmap to scale AI. It's like I said, it's like a recipe. We need all these ingredients in the right proportion to make make our AI amazing. That's it. So AI is, I'll say, an accelerator tool. I started with the ice cream story, the strange concoction, and I'll say it was a fun reminder, even though that most advanced AI can come up with results that make us scratch our heads or not good. So it definitely underscores the need for human oversight when implementing AI in our business strategy. It requires strong data foundation, clear communication, and a strategic framework. And I think it's our job as humans to guide AI in the right direction so that we can avoid the peanut butter slimes and achieve the innovation and growth. Thank you. I hope you found it useful. And that's it, Vijay. And I think we can talk about questions.
Great, thank you, Prachi. First of all, that was such an amazing sweep through the landscape of what it takes to get AI done. You're getting a lot of thumbs up.
I see that.
I was thinking about something quite funny actually when you were doing this, because you had at your 10 steps in your framework, and our classes are 10 weeks long.
Oh, there you go.
And I was thinking to myself, you did 10 weeks, I mean, obviously quickly, but 10 weeks worth of material in 20 minutes. And really, each one of those could be a 3-hour lecture easily, if not longer. So thank you for that sweep. But I think what we were hoping to do, and of course, we will follow up as part of what we do as our programming. But I think the first thing you illustrated, without even talking about how you do any of those steps, is the scope of what it takes to build an AI-powered organization, right? I mean, it just is a very, very complex endeavor. And one of the things I personally worry about is so many people, and I was reading the statistics, it's less than 25% of people who've actually just used AI through generative AI. But sort of one of the downsides of generative AI is that it gives people a misleading impression of what it actually takes to do what you just talked about. Because so when I look at those McKinsey productivity statistics, I have a hard time sort of matching that, of sort of legitimizing that, not even sort of interpreting that is probably a better way to say it, versus what it actually takes. Because if you don't do all these things that you're talking about, you're not going to you might get some productivity impact from point solutions, as you pointed out, but if you want sort of the wholesale impact on all the dimensions, you have productivity, growth, innovation, whatever else, efficiency, that's hard to do across the board to get these $4 trillion impacts. So what's your take on sort of what is the duration of the roadmap, if you will? Like, what's it going to take to get out of this pilot purgatory to something reasonably representing scale? Because so much of the discussion is focused on big tech, which I think is sort of unrealistic given where everybody else is at. But your thoughts on what it's going to take, how long it's going to take, how companies can get started?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the struggle or the challenge is when people start thinking of AI, or when I would, sprinkle the Gen AI dust on it or something, like just use it. I think that is the main challenge, or companies are just sometimes trying to just figure out that, we're just going to use AI across our organization and that's it. But I think honing in on what you are really trying to achieve. What are your business priorities for this year? Is it to better your customer experience? Then yes, okay. Then start using, then how can we use Gen AI and AI per se overall to improve the customer experience? Trying to achieve all of it is like starting running initially without the crawl and walk approach. I think that is where AI adoption is hard, and then is when you start running without the training, you are going to fail. And then that's when the challenge happens, or it's not going to be as scalable as you had interpreted. So my opinion is on that, you have to really hone in, like, what is the right goal for your AI, and not be just going for that shiny object, Gen AI or whatever, and think of it from a tech perspective. Like, what are you trying to achieve? And maybe sometimes you don't even need AI to solve that, honestly, because you don't need a blowtorch to caramelize the creme brulee on top. You just need a small little one. So sometimes you don't need AI. Maybe you just need predictive analytics or some simple model to do that instead of making a complex So that helps, and making sure that your assessment of your own organization, what's your risk tolerance, what's your maturity, current maturity, that is assessed really carefully before launching into any big large scale projects.
The other thing, obviously, is data is at the heart of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
What, in your view, has, like, we've talked about single version of the truth for over 15 years now, at least. So I'm curious to hear from you, like, where are the real challenges with data? Is it just that companies have not integrated their data? Is it a data quality issue? Like, what is going on? I mean, it's hard to answer, without having a specific company in mind, but generically, there's some, like, what are the things you can do to fix your data issues?
There are many aspects of it, from in terms of the data issues or getting your data foundation ready. First of all, means there's no single source of truth anymore. Means, of course, your data has to be connected, because we have tons of data being collected right now. It's not just structured data, it's unstructured data. And the volume of it is humongous. So we have to spend, instead of spending a lot of time collecting the data, which is important, but how do we spend time on connecting those data as well? Is your data, customer data, across the product team, across marketing, across the transaction? Is it connected to at least tell me that this is your customer? Is that customer really defined? And how is the organization figuring out the overall operating model? Is that the data governance at the federated model, and then analytics is happening on the business side? All of these are so important. And data engineering, like, do we have a few things that are extremely important for any AI implementation? The knowledge graphs, the data labeling, are all the data labeled? And that is an extremely hard one for using unstructured data. And what's the tech stack that you're going to use? Are you going to use a lake house or data lakes? Figuring all of that, it all depends on what you're trying to achieve as an organization, like what's your goal. But there are a few basic things like data labeling, knowledge graph, data explainability. Is your data telling that what it does? Is that charted out or not? Are there ethical guidelines in place? How is everyone going to use that data? If you're touching it, what aspects, what variables you're touching, and then make sure that if you're building a model, there's a proper there's no bias in data. You have data to make sure that your model is risk-free, bias-free. So many aspects.
No, and one of the things you emphasized was also the role of humans. You talked about the slime example, but also one of the things I'm familiar with so many companies where, they start moving towards these AI-based solutions. They start getting these things that sometimes are intuitive, other times are counterintuitive. And then the trust becomes really important, right? Because then it's all of a sudden like, hey, we invested all this money, but now we don't want to believe what we actually are generating, even though, in my view, some of those predictions are actually correct or accurate. But it's such a cultural shift to go from this is how we've always done it to now rely on. You had that nice chart about trust in data, and I thought that was interesting. I'm going to there's so many questions coming in that I think I'm going to not ask my own questions and really give the audience a chance to ask their questions. Yeah, I'm going to start with Angela Moran, who is the CIO at a credit union. She says, you mentioned a literacy program to educate stakeholders and employees. Do you have a real world example of something you have rolled out?
Yeah, I have many examples. And Angela, I think I met you at Vijay's Center of Digital Transformation, the conference. So nice to see you here. There are many ways of doing data and AI literacy, and we can connect on and offline. But basically, it's all about what are the levels of employee, and by levels, I mean, are you talking about leaders, executives? Are you talking about your C-suite executive? Are you talking about the managers, your data scientists, your engineers? And creating a literacy program to educate all of them at their level about whatever AI project or data that we are implementing. So the literacy program for an executive is going to be a very high level one versus a literacy program for your data scientist who wants to learn about the data engineering. And at Publicis, we built something called Marcel AI. And it's an AI, it's a platform, something like where you go in and say, today I want to learn about X. And it will give you a few programs that already exist on that topic. And sometimes you're like, oh, I want to meet with people who have already done it. So, and it matches you with people who knows about data engineering so that you can know more about it. Or you want to learn about leadership principles. So it's all about kind of connecting the people to the right literacy program at the time. I've also upskilled my team by collaborating with external vendors like Coursera courses or Udemy or a cohort-based learning. So there's so many ways you can upskill your team. So it's a combination of your internal literacy programs and also going external, because there are some amazing programs out there too. And happy to chat more about it, Angela.
And Angela, just because, I am literally launching as we speak an AI literacy course for our executive MBA program. It's something we just decided to add this year. So we had classes on competing with digital, but now we've added 3 modules to our executive MBA program on what is AI really from multiple perspectives. It's sort of the framing we use and very much in line with what Prachi used. So that's confirms that we may be on to something here. We call it literacy, fluency, and mastery internally. So, and it just matches to the different levels that you might need for the different folks in your organization. Let me go to Jim Phillips. I just picked him, but he's also a CIO at a credit union. Establishing a governance program over AI products being deployed across organizations has become a mandate to get a handle on use cases, efficiency, and cost. How important is it to establish standards and oversight in large organizations?
Can you repeat the last part? How important is it?
What is it to establish standards and oversight in large organizations for the governance, basically?
Yeah, I'll say it is extremely important because it can get hairy pretty soon, because if there are not standards and practices established in an organization, it's hard. What is accessible? Who has access rights to it? And one important thing I will mention on that is to having a steering committee, a cross-functional steering committee for the data governance, because there are times when there are issues that data team would not understand. For example, the legal aspect of it. So extremely important to include your chief legal officer, the chief security officer, because there are so many things that can go bad. And if it's publicized, the standards are set, it's easier to mitigate all those risks. It's all about risk mitigations, mitigate those risks that might come later. So if you have done it initially, you are avoiding all those risks.
Prachi, we spoke to a chief legal officer who was very funny, actually. He said, we always get blamed for slowing down AI. And he says, but if once we explain the risks of what can go wrong, especially for large companies that are publicly traded or have deep pockets, I mean, some of these downside risks are really massive. And, we know of companies that have revealed inadvertently, intellectual property on these LLM platforms, or just things that get you into trouble because you're making biased decisions, for example, right? And so I think these are just really important things to get right. A question from Nancy. Apologies in advance because I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce your middle name, but Nancy Faginas Cody. As business executives, it's on the same theme, which is why I picked it. As business executives, how should we be thinking about applying a risk management profile for Gen AI and handling potential legislative actions? So obviously there's...
Yeah, that's a good one. We haven't, as in US, I know UK has released a long list of AI regulation, and they are in the process of mandating it. Not there yet, but it's pretty comprehensive. US has not released in terms of the nationwide regulation, but I know a lot of states have been proposing, including California, where we are at. What was your question? I completely missed it because I remember the regulation part, and
so
it's all about setting up the governance. The similar.
Yeah, it was about risk management, because the question's been taken off. So we need to, let me see if I can, let me pull it up from the answered question. Sorry, it is, as business executives, how should we be thinking about applying a risk management profile for Gen AI and handling potential legislative actions?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it's part of, that's why I have added responsible AI. That's what it's part of. The risk management is an element of responsible AI. I'll say it can start on day one, and there's still so much to be done in terms of education and action. It starts with company's values. What are the clear principles for how the firm will apply generative AI or AI, and what are the guardrails that needs to be ensured that the data and the AI it's done in a safe implementation. And recognizing the importance of data security means the company level data and the prompts, they remain within the enterprise walls. And for that to happen, have to have the secure contracts with the large language models, the application providers, as well as robust training to make sure that everyone who's touching it, creating all the employees, they understand the difference between the enterprise tools, they understand and the public tools, so that the code or proprietary data are not inadvertently shared in public models. So it starts upstream of compliance and monitoring, and then goes into the risk and mitigation practices.
Here's an age-old question on what determining value. So this is Ishwar Barbary, who said, how exactly do you determine value? I've been in this business for a long time, and this is a question we've always gotten, like, what is the value of IT really? And how do you sort of, and one of the things I want to emphasize that you said, but you at the end, was about measurement, because I think that is really critical and often gets underutilized. I think sometimes people are scared to figure out, did this thing actually pay off once we've invested millions of dollars? So I think that's really important, but they're related. How do you sort of actually, like, what's the best way, or what are some reasonable ways to think about identifying the value of what you do in advance?
Yeah, that's a good question. And like you said, age-old question. The way I have done with multiple companies where we have decided the whole data and AI strategy is workshopping it, because like I said, it's a team sport. So we bring people from different organizations who are going to touch and who are going to be influenced by data and AI. So you bring your product team, you bring your marketing team, your leaders across, and you actually talk about what are the business goals or priorities. And usually I've seen that when you derive value from those business goals and priorities, it's usually more effective. So if your goal is to increase revenue by 30%, then that becomes a part of value. If it's reducing the cost or cost savings, then that becomes your value. So it really depends on your organizational priorities, what you consider value. And then you frame it up, like how will you measure it, Vijay, like you said. So if you say customer experience, driving greater customer experience is value for you, then how are you going to measure it? Is it through Net Promoter Score? Is it through the service that you do? Is it through brand health that they will rate over time and you see an improvement in it? So kind of quantifying those at that stage when you're determining the overall value is also extremely important. So value in terms, it could go from experience to financial to anything else that you want it to be, but it has to be linked to your business goals.
Yeah, and like we said, that it is, and it's a particularly difficult question, for AI and technology more generally, because when you start talking about data, and so there's a huge fixed cost that you have to incur before you even start getting value on individual projects, right? And so I think that's one of the challenges but people don't ask that question as much, because we know we've done it for many years in the past. If you're going to build a factory for automobile manufacturing, for example, sort of people understand how to separate out the fixed cost of the factory versus the marginal cost of building a single car. Somehow with technology, because it's a little more intangible, people struggle to articulate value, but it has to be answered.
Yeah. And there's a great book I've read on that. It's all about how building value proposition. And whoever asked this question, connect with me. I'll send the link. It's a good intensive explanation of the whole thing.
Norman Tyrell has an interesting question. You mentioned stakeholder alignment is one of the key success factors, and one of the hardest things. You said something like, if I remember correctly, when many of these projects fail is because stakeholder alignment hasn't been addressed adequately. The question is, what is the unique aspect of AI that makes it critical to gain stakeholder alignment? Like, why AI? Like, why? I guess that's the question.
Why AI needs that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say the main reason is because first, the budget that it entails. Second, the risk that it can get to. So I said those are the two, because of which for any AI project, we need to make sure that the alignment is there early on. And that takes the longest time too, because since it's a high budget project, there's always more questions coming from the CFOs. Since the risk is very high, if data gets leaked, if there's bias, if there's anything goes wrong, the risk is so much higher. So that's why it's important to connect to the chief security officers and the legal officer and get alignment on what you're trying to do, and making sure that the guardrails are established, getting that alignment before you actually launch or scale your AI project. I'll say that's why, because it's such an important aspect of it.
I would, if with your permission, if you don't mind, I'll add one more thing. I think it's, alignment also sort of resolves the expectations mismatch sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because, AI is fundamentally a new technology. I mean, it's been around for 50 years, but the way we're talking about today is quite new. And, when we teach, or because that's, you talk to different people, everybody has a very different understanding, which is what, goes back to the literacy question. You need to have everybody in your organization on some kind of level playing field, or a common understanding of what AI is, what the different technologies within AI, or where the technology is going. And oftentimes when we sort of have these conversations, we find that people have very different expectations of what this thing is going to do for them, how quickly, how much it will cost. And so it's to your point, I think I agree with you 100%. Stakeholder alignment is huge, because you're just really building a common understanding around a very risky investment. Let me take one. David Gibbons, this is also a question that comes up a lot, but I think it's worth answering. How do you address leadership that is really excited by the potential of AI, but defers to day-to-day employees around AI because those team members are not computer science? So there's a big mismatch, right? I mean, clearly in many companies, the leaders are not, they grew up in an era when tech wasn't that important, and are not as tech savvy, and certainly not as AI savvy, which I think a lot of people struggle with. How do you sort of deal with, like, who should be making these decisions? How do we educate leadership? And frankly, how do we educate rank and file? We're probably going back to the literacy conversation, but
yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, I have a funny ritual that I do when I first join a company. I mean, I always ask them to define the key concepts. Like I'd ask them to define AI governance for me, or data governance. And then I'd ask them to define AI for me. And then when you ask 20 people across the different organization, including the leaders, executives, and you get 100 different kind of responses. And then that kind of level sets you as a leader coming in, that what is the understanding across the organization. There's always three different definitions of AI. Is it automated intelligence that they're thinking about? Is it about augmented intelligence, or is it actually artificial intelligence? So once you have that understanding, and we're going back to the whole literacy part of it, educating them is very important on what this is, and what is it not. Also, both aspects of it. And that, I'll say that early on, and that helps with the alignment part. But yes, that's why the whole data literacy aspect is important. And I forgot to mention that change management is a huge one in that too. And that's where the whole comes with the communication. Like, how do you make sure that everyone is aligned across? So communicating it at all regular intervals, and making sure the communication also makes sure that people understand that it's not a threat to their jobs or to their lives. It's something that is going to help. It's an augmentation to their intelligence.
And then Shoaib Bozorg-Mary, who actually was a past student of mine and is very senior in IT at UCI, can you please provide some tips about key attributes of cross-functional AI governance boards that work well to maintain a robust board over time?
Ooh. Can I teach a class on that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's huge, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. Again, like it's a part of what this is an ever evolving topic that is going on. Responsible AI governance. I'll say there are a couple of aspects of it. Making sure that when you are establishing, have a steering committee that is cross-functional, who have people from across different departments who are a part of this. The second part is the risk mitigation, understanding of risk awareness and mitigation, and that are all the required skills, I'll say, for the technical and the data talent. And then have clear processes to embed this risk mitigation in all the solutions, involving the legal function as well, and making sure that the models are designed to allow the audits, to allow the bias checks, allow the risk assessment, and like I said, have the enterprise-wide board to make decisions on responsible AI governance. I'll say those are the few which are key to start any kind of governance, AI and data governance, and then it falls depending on what your organization's priorities are. But I'll say those four are
That's great.
extremely
No, that's very helpful. And Shira, know where to find us. So reach out if you want more clarification. Let me go to a very easy question. What is the title of the book mentioned on building stakeholder alignment?
Yes, I will. Yeah, I'll find it. It sits in my library in that room, but text me or email me.
No, so why don't we do this? We send a post-event email with the link. We'll just put it in that one once we get that from you. Pooja Raja has an interesting question. So it's a little slightly different dimension, but how do you decide between sort of closed versus open LLMs based, given, as she puts it, 2024 is the year of AI intent?
Good question. Again, depends. What I have seen across organizations is most of the beginning was started with the off-the-shelf solutions that's out there. So take any foundational model and start using that to build your AI applications. But as the organizations mature, it means that's not enough, because I think that will be table stakes for all organizations because it's off the shelf. But how do you enhance that by your own data, by your own content, so your customer data? So if it's about a chatbot, how do you improve that chatbot with your data to make sure that it understands your industry, if it's manufacturing, healthcare, and it understands your customers so that it gives those answers? So I will say that's phase two, enhancing. And the last one is build your own LLM. Usually I've seen there are a couple of different companies, I'm sure that's out in the news, who are building their own LLM, small LLMs and large language models and small language models. And depends on your priorities. But to start with, you on your talent, if they can build their own foundation model, it's a highly complex. So it's the whole build versus buy versus augment strategy, and whichever your organization is comfortable with. And again, this is also a topic, it depends a lot on the organization.
Then you've got a very strong compliment from Anne Cameron, very strong insights and tips to apply to our organizations on AI governance and recommendations on change management. Thank you. That's always nice. Someone's asking a question, I'm going to partly answer this. I think the best criteria to use AI is those which are related to customers' experience. Am I right? And I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, customer experience, marketing, sales, service operations, there are so many areas. And there's a list of use cases, but yes, marketing, sales, and customer experience are one of the top ones. And if you're thinking Gen AI, yes, but then if you think of broader AI, analytical AI, predictive, then you can get in all other industries as well. Then healthcare is a huge one, where AI is still being used, not just Gen AI. Gen AI has use, but overall AI is also being used.
Yeah, if I was to rephrase that, I would basically say what we really need to think about is the customer value proposition. Because I think experience is a word that is a little bit people interpret it differently, of course, but it really tends to focus on the experience that you have when interacting with whoever that particular vendor or supplier might be. But in a broader way, I think ultimately everything is about the customer value proposition, right? And so when I think about Walmart did before AI, but it was still very much analytics driven, was, their inventory management was so efficient and they so outcompeted Kmart. That ultimately, became a very strong part of the everyday low price brand promise. And then I think that's the essential thing, which is how do we, and you said this at the start, which is what is your vision? What is your goal? And ultimately, how do you deliver on your brand promise? How do you deliver on your value proposition? I think the one thing to emphasize with AI, and I would urge all of the audience to think about this. I'm going to make a bold statement, and it's like I don't think anybody's value proposition today is going to be good enough in 10 years or maybe even in 5 years. I think AI is so pushing the productivity front, so strongly pushing the productivity frontier outwards, which simply means we can do more with less or more, that what we do today will not be enough. And I think all of us need to be thinking really hard about what is it that distinguishes us in the eyes of our customers, and how can we deliver on those drivers of what customers care about. So I want to sort of take you to sort of the where I want, the one last question for me. At the end of the day, you want to deliver competitive advantage. You want to, as a chief analytics officer, chief data officer, I mean, that's our job nowadays, right? Which is how do we make our companies fundamentally more competitive than in the past? And I get this, where you get started, and obviously we're, depending on how you choose it, day one, day two, how do you see is the path to really sort of, because nobody seems to doubt that in 10 years or 20 years, they pick your number, the world is going to look very different. It sort of creeps up on us, and then you look back and say, hey, wait a second, when did all of this change? And I think we're going to be there in a few years. And so how do we make sure that our company keeps progressing, doing sort of more and more meaningful things with AI? Like, what does that path look like?
Wow. Can I have another 1 hour to talk about that?
I'll give you 1 minute.
No, it's a great question. And as leaders, I think we should all think about it. Means I will say this is just where we are at is we are just at the tip of the AI iceberg.
The crawl phase, as you put it.
Yeah, this is the crawl phase, because we're done with the hype. Now we are experimenting, having a little use cases. And with the increasing restrictions and fading hype, I still believe that AI will leave a positive legacy, and in terms of the broader realm of artificial intelligence, because we are getting valuable insights, investments, all of that built right now. And there other emerging techniques will take advantage of this. Other emerging techniques will be built based off of this. I know I've heard of one is causal AI, which talks about reducing bias and increase the accuracy by equating correlation with causation. So that's coming up. Means question of poses what ifs. Federated machine learnings, they are also a healthy competition. So what I'm saying is this thing is going to keep evolving. On the end of it, Mustafa Suleiman has tried to answer that in his book. Means we are not at the phase where AI is sentient yet. I don't think it's going to happen soon. So it's not a scary situation. I'm optimistic about the future. There's so many things that we are learning, and it's going to keep happening. It's full of insights.
So one last question, because I actually saved this one because it was actually one of the first questions, and I saved it. Can you speak about AGI? Everybody wants to know about artificial general intelligence. Since you brought up sentience, so that's the final question for the day. What do you think? Is it coming soon? What's it going to mean for us? Are we going to
I don't think it's coming soon. Based on what we see today, of course, things have progressed so quickly in the last 1 year or so. We are not there yet. And I am not the scientist. I'm a practitioner, but based on the 6 or 7 books I've read of people who are pioneers in this industry, not scared. And I think I'll just point out that we have the control over it. We as humans have the control and the power to shape it the way we want. And that's why you always say human intervention and the collaboration with AI is extremely important.
Yeah, and to that point, because we talk to a lot of the computer science, we have a fantastic machine learning group at UCI, and I was just talking to them recently. And there's so much discussion about LLMs, but there's people out there like Jan LeCun at NYU, at Meta these days, part-time, and he fundamentally believes that these LLM models will never get us to AGI, right? And so who knows when it's actually going to happen. I think the message for all of us in the short run, because there are all of these existential things we have to think about, is, and this is often being said, it's to the extent that we are all prepared as individuals and executives and managers to work as citizens, to work alongside AI, we will help determine that we get a better future. Because I think it's going to take all of us in our own roles to act responsibly and sort of contribute to the conversation about AI so that all of our companies and our universities can all do it better. With that, let me end the session. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you all for joining. Prachi, thank you so much for such a fantastic presentation. I hope all of you had enjoyed it. We tried to stay on time. We're 2 minutes late, so our apologies for that. But we look forward to seeing you at our next session. And if you have suggestions for us, please email us. The email was cdt@mirage.uci.edu. And we love seeing you here, and we hope we're doing some contributing to the level of sort of literacy and fluency that our community has around AI, because that is our mission as the Center for Digital Transformation. So once again, thank you all. Thank you, Prachi, and thank you to our supporters, KPMG and the Beal Family Foundation. Again, thank you all for attending and taking time out to join us.